It's Wayne from howtofish.com.au, and what I'd like to do in this video is have a look at making your own sinkers. Not just any sinkers, these are sinkers specifically for rivers, and specifically so that you can actually wrap burley around them so that the sinker itself becomes an attraction but is heavy enough to be able to withstand the force of fairly strong rivers. Now, all you're going to need for this is a hammer, and that's to flatten out the lead you'll be dealing with, a pair of pliers so you can bend some wire, something to cut the lead with, some fairly heavy duty scissors or snippets of some sort. I use the wire that I use for this is paper clips of different sizes, the large paper clips, the smaller ones. Now, you can use a sinker. This is a size 4 bean sinker, or the lead you can use can be flashing. This is old flashing that I've been renovating my house. This was around our windows, had to be replaced. I've replaced it, but I use this because the lead is great for working with. Or you can get lead from anywhere. This lead here is from lead lighting, so the window work, the glass work in lead lighting. My brother-in-law happens to do that. He gives me some of the spare lead that he has, and I can use that, and it's usually just hitting it with a hammer, and by hitting it together you can actually mold it into different shapes. And then finally you'll need some modelling clay. This is female, there's others about. I just use this one because I got a large number of these some years ago. And now our objective here is to turn a combination of these things, the lead, modelling clay and a large paper clip, into something like that, or something a little bit bigger like that, or something really quite big like that, and that's about 80 grams worth. The reason that I've got this shape, as you can see, it's flat. That's so that on a river, especially if there's a bit of flow in the river, I want it to whole bottom, be flat on the bottom and not pushed along. This has a low profile, very thin, that way it won't move around too much. But also I want to be able to pack my burley around it, so you can imagine I won't be casting out a long way. I'm going to pack burley around it. It'll probably end up being about the size of a tennis ball. Now I realise that not everybody is going to have flashing, old flashing or spare lead. So, okay, if we start with a sinker, what we want to be able to do is flatten that out so that we just want something that's probably going to be about that size, maybe the size of a 50-cent piece. And that's enough to actually wrap burley around. So the first thing we want to do is, before we flatten it with a hammer, is we just want to put the wire in there so that we have a loop on both sides of it. So we're going to push a paper clip in there. I'll take one of the smaller ones because they're probably going to fit in there more easily. So all we're doing then is pulling those out, okay, straightening it out. I usually leave the smallest loop in there, maybe just tidy it up a bit, okay. So I'll just push that down like that. It doesn't matter if it's a bit rough because most of this is going to be covered by the modelling clay. So we get this fairly straight and then push it into the hole, okay. So that's all we have to do with that. We just need a loop there, and then we create a loop there. Now we can make it fairly long. We can make there quite a bit of distance between the end of the loop and the sinker because it just gives something else to mold the burley around. So in this case I'm just going to now just turn this round, do the same thing with this. I might give that a little bit more space like that. Neaten it up. Okay. Try to have them both facing the same way. So if they're not, just twist them so that's all you need to do with that first off. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to hit this with a hammer, which will start to flatten it out, and it also will it'll hold the wire in there very securely. Okay, right then, now I have flattened that. You can see it's quite thin there, but now you can see that it's actually taken up all of the spare wire, so there's no space there between the wire and the lead. Now one thing I should mention about lead is that handling it with your naked hands, you must wash afterwards, and it's probably best to use rubber gloves, as we know that lead can be toxic. So although there's no fumes from it, actually putting your skin, making contact with the lead is not good for your hands, not good for your body. So just there as a warning there, please, I would suggest you use rubber gloves. Now what I'm going to do is mold the modeling clay over this lead so that it can end up looking like that. Right, so we just take this out. There we go. Okay. So what you then do is just start molding it into it's like plasticine. This is a bit hard, but it's normally like plasticine, and you start molding it into a shape, get it soft, and then you can actually wrap it around that. Now I've just been flattening this out, so I've made it really quite soft, and all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to wrap this around the lead and then mold it so that it becomes smoother like that. And all of the clay will do is add a little bit of bulk to it and cover up so that there's only a small piece of wire showing for me to tie my line to. You can leave it like this if you wanted to. I just find these are more prone to tangling, but back when I used to make these quite often, I would just make them out of the raw lead, or the raw lead like this, make them a bit neater than that, and that would be fine. But now I think, as you can see, I've molded this around that, flattened it out, and what I've tried to do is flatten it and extend the clay beyond the boundary of the lead inside, because the lead inside is only taking up about that area. So I want to give myself enough surface so that I can mold a fair bit of berley over that and it will be held in place. The type of berley I use for this is my own bite hard berley, but I have some sticky additives I put into it so that it actually holds onto this for a long time. But that's all you're doing, so it's just molding till you get to that point. You've got the two areas that you can attach your line to, and then what you do with this is you put it into the oven at 110 degrees for 30 minutes, and that will then go hard and you have your sinker all ready to go. Now another way of doing this is just to take a piece of lead. This is probably only about 2.5 centimeters wide. You can see how long it is. All I did is I folded it over, so it's just taking a piece like this, it's just cutting it, folding it over. Once I've folded it over, I bend a larger paper clip this time into a shape that then allows me to have the two loops showing. I'll hit that with a hammer. In fact, I probably don't even need to do that. All I need to do is just flatten that down so that I've now got that shape there. Now, in the past, that's what I would use. I would put my berley over the top of that, and that's what I would use. But since I have the modelling clay, and since it has a good finish, and since it becomes less likely for things to catch, I will use that over the top of this. And what it does, the added advantage of that is it makes this a bit wider, which means you can actually put more, you can mould more of the berley over the top of it. Okay, so that's that one now, that flatter one. I've just moulded that round now, so it's a reasonable shape, reasonable symmetry there, and nice and flat so that it will lay flat on the bottom with burley over the top. So here we have the weights. What I do is I usually write on them what the weight is. So I've tried to get a bit of a variation of weights so that they can be used for different water flows. So the lightest one being 44 grams, 52 grams, 85 grams, and this one, you can't see it, but that's 115 grams. So that's a big heavy thing. And the thing is that one of those packets of clay will do a number of these, so it actually works out quite well. But the other thing that is really good is that these are self-hooking. Now in the past you would have seen some of the self-hooking rigs that I've made, and look, honestly, they work. The only thing I find is that I've never been able to put enough weight on them so that it actually is effective every time in hooking those fish. With these types of weights you can put anything, any type of weight in there you like. So this one's quite heavy. As I said, this is 115 grams, so this is very, very heavy. This one here, what I've done is I've tied on a length of fluorocarbon line. The reason I use fluorocarbon is it's quite stiff and it holds the hook away from the weight. The reason I want that to happen is because as you can imagine, as you cast in, it falls to the bottom, okay? The hook will trail behind the weight. So it'll be up there, the main line will be up here as well, and there's a chance that they'll tangle. So what you want to do is keep it stiff so that it'll actually push away from that main line. But you don't want it so thick that it looks suspicious to the fish. So I find that the fluorocarbon is stiff enough to do that. Monofilament that is the same stiffness is much thicker. So that's why I've gone with the fluorocarbon. It's as fine as I can get away with and still hook those fish, but it's stiff. The other thing I've done is I've put a little boom on this, okay, which is just a piece of tubing. I've run it over the main line before I tied this on, and what it does, it is also helping to push that main line away from the weight and away from the other line. So what will happen is when this lands, it's got all of the burley wrapped around it. So you've got a burley ball coming down. As you can imagine, this then is pushed away, falls to the side, but it's very close. This is only about 20 centimeters, this length, even probably a little bit less, and so it's close enough for the fish to find. They've got all the attraction here, and little pieces of the same bait will be on that hook. And then they find a nice big delicious piece of bait just there, and they'll take it, and as they take that and they feel something in their mouth, they'll try to get away, and there'll be no give. That weight will hold that hook and it'll go into their mouth. Anyway, I'll explain more about the tubing and a little bit more finessing of the hook so you get a better hook up rate in another video. And so look, this is how these are used. So if you're interested in information about fishing, about gear, go to my website howtofish.com.au, and if you're interested in a fishing lesson, I've got one now called the Complete Fishing Video that's available on my website as well. If you've enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe and push that little bell so that you get alerted every time I put a video up, and I try to put one up about every week. See you next time.